The Town of Southern Shores Council Workshop for June 19th, 2021 is now in session. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Over the past week or so, we've lost two members of our Outer Banks community, John Colgrove from Southern Shores and Tom Williamson from Kitty Hawk, both of whom I was fortunate to have known and considered my friend. I would ask you keep the families of these two exceptional individuals in your thoughts and prayers this morning. Please join me. Thank you. Council, I need a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Leo. Do I have a second?
Get to my mic here.
I'll second.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Jim. All in favor of approving the agenda for today's meeting indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We have an agenda, folks. This time, a general public comment. Do you have any more of these, Sheila? Just the one? I've got a larger type version. Well, go ahead and use that one if you don't mind.
Sure.
Elizabeth, do you mind reading that?
Not it.
Thank you. This is a public comment from one of our residents. I've asked our Mayor Pro Tem to read it for the record.
This is from Dave Mackey, our resident at 218 Ocean Boulevard. To the Town of Southern Shores, it is my understanding you are exploring taxing oceanfront and oceanside property owners disproportionately more for beach nourishment based on the assumption they benefit more from the project. This approach is ill-conceived. Property owners closer to the ocean already contribute more to the tax base, as they should, based on property values alone. In addition, those who rent their homes contribute higher occupancy taxes since rents for their houses are higher. Asking us to carry a disproportionately larger share of beach nourishment costs is a convenient way to shift the financial burden. The entire town is here because of the beach. No one on the ocean suggests we should pay disproportionately less for sidewalks and parking lots, most recently Dogwood Trail, benefiting those who live further from the ocean. No one on the ocean suggests we should ignore traffic cut through on summer weekends because it doesn't affect us. No one on the ocean suggests we should reject a library because it benefits summer visitors less than permanent residents. Oceanfront owners contribute more property tax because we should and because it benefits the town as a whole. The examples listed above make the town a better place, and currently property tax assessments provide a sound basis of fairly allocating the expense for all projects. Attempting to allocate funding based on the direct benefit to each individual homeowner is based purely on a subjective evaluation of what each individual gains. This approach creates a potential slippery slope for future expenses that benefit the town as a whole. Thanks, Dave Mackey.
Thank you, Elizabeth. No further public comment, Sheila? In that case, I'll close public comment this time. Thank you. Item 3, business items, beach nourishment. This time we'll hear from Cliff. I think Ken Wilson is coming online. Okay. There he is. Good morning, Ken.
Hey, good morning. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got a few PowerPoint slides I'd like to share with everybody. And can you guys all see my screen now?
Yes.
Great, perfect. All right, I am going to turn off my video while I'm talking, just so that we don't overpower the Wi-Fi. All right. So I want to run through a couple of updates on the beach profile surveys that we had conducted back in the summer of 2020. And I want to give you a few updates on where we are with the design process of the proposed 2022 project. So just to kind of ease into this a little bit, I want to give you a little bit of background for anybody that's listening online as well, just to kind of bring everybody up to speed. This is a little bit of a timeline. So we've got in December 2017, after the project was constructed in the summer of 2017, CPE, our firm, conducted the initial town-wide beach profile survey. And so that covered everything from the northern portion of Southern Shores to the southern portion of Southern Shores, from Duck to Kitty Hawk, essentially. Shortly after we collected that data, we developed an initial beach assessment. So in other words, we provided a report that provided background erosion rates and shoreline change rates based on that new data, which was the first time data had been conducted along the entire town. Now, if you'll remember, there was some data that had been collected by the Corps of Engineers back in the early 2000s that went from about 3rd Avenue south. So we were able to compute some longer-term erosion rates and shoreline change rates. And then there were a few profiles that we had up on the north end that were first collected in 2013 when we started working with the town of Duck. But there was a segment, and I'll show you a graphic here in a minute, that this was the first data set that we had collected. So we provided that initial assessment report to the town in March 2018. By December 2018, we had talked to the town about next steps, and we conducted a vulnerability analysis. And that's when we started looking at storm damage reduction by the existing dune condition, the existing beach condition, and where there might be areas along the town where the shoreline was vulnerable. So that report was provided in December 2018. And it was based off of that December 2017 data. Well, in May 2019, we conducted the second town-wide beach profile survey. So all of the profiles from Duck to Kitty Hawk surveyed again. And then shortly after that, we basically updated that vulnerability analysis and those options that we provided in the beach management plan that were associated with where we recommended placing sand, what sort of fill densities we might need, what sort of background erosion rates you're dealing with. We updated all of that, provided that report in September 2019 that basically used that summer 2019 data to update our original plan. And so then between December 2019 and January 2020, there was some discussion with town council about the recommendations that had come out in that report that were primarily focused on providing storm damage reduction along the town, wherever the vulnerability assessment determined there were vulnerable structures. And so that beach fill recommendation basically suggested placing sand from 3rd Avenue south, but did not include any sand placed in the northern part of the town. But during that time, in the year 2019, there had been some noticeable changes in the beach up on the north end. And so the town council had received a lot of public comment about concerns about the width of the beach up on the north end. And they had asked us, we had developed these project goals, and they had asked us to reevaluate those project goals, and should we specifically modify that 3rd goal there on the slide, which originally read maintain a healthy beach that supports valuable shorebirds and sea turtle nesting, to maintain a healthy beach that provides sufficient usable beach and supports valuable shorebirds and sea turtle nesting. And so in between December 19 and January 2020, we looked at modifying those goals and how we might determine what usable beach was. And we'll go through a couple of slides that show that here in a few minutes. And then after we updated those goals, we provided a report to the town that included a recommendation that recommended placing sand along that northern that northern portion of town from 3rd Avenue north to Duck. So in June 2020, the town conducted the 3rd townwide beach profile survey that was conducted by our firm this past summer. And then in July 2020 was when the town authorized our firm to start conducting the permitting and the design of the proposed beach nourishment project. So today, what I want to talk about are those two last bullets. I'm going to talk about what we've learned from that June 2020 survey and sort of where we are with that the permitting and the design that was authorized back in July 2020. All right, so I mentioned this is a figure from the actual report that shows all of the profiles, all the transects that are surveyed when we conduct these townwide surveys. And the blue bar up at the top is to remind folks that along this section is the section where we actually had older data dating back to the early 2000s. I think there was a 2004, a 2005, and a 2006 Corps of Engineers survey. So along that portion of the beach, we can track erosion rates dating back to October 2006. And so when I provide these summary results, I'll provide rates for since we've been monitoring the beach, which was December 2017 to present. And for this section of the beach, I'll also provide that October 2006 to June 2020 rate as well. And then I mentioned there are a couple of profiles up on the north end that we first started surveying when we began working with the town of Duck. So these surveys here, these northern 3 profiles, we've got data that dates back to 2013, and we can provide sort of longer term erosion rates for those profiles. And then this small section in the middle, the December 2017 survey that we conducted was the first time those profiles were surveyed. So the data only goes back to December 2017 for this small section. One more thing. Throughout the report, we'll talk about the northern section, the central section, and the southern section. These sections were broken up. Sometimes they're called reaches. These sections were broken up based on sort of the level of vulnerability, the way that the shoreline performs in those areas. So essentially, we've got from 3rd Avenue north is the north section, from 3rd Avenue down to just a little south of Chickahawk Trail is what we refer to as the central section. And then from that area, just south of Chickahawk Trail, I think that profile is about 400 feet south of Chickahawk Trail. From that profile down to Kitty Hawk is the southern section. All right, so 2 types of changes that we typically report. You guys may remember these slides, but just to kind of update everybody and anybody that's listening for the first time, when we talk about shoreline change, what we're really talking about is the change of a specific contour that's measured on the beach. So if we look at this profile, this blue dotted line is the survey that was conducted. It's a cross section of the beach that was conducted in May 2015. And the mean high water mark was in a specific location at that point in time. And then we conduct this same survey again on this transect. We're showing the May 2015 and June 2017 profiles. So the red profile was conducted 2 years later, essentially, and we measured the distance between where that mean high water contour was in 2015, where that mean high water contour is in 2017, and we can develop a rate for that, okay? That's a little bit different than when we start talking about volume change. Here, we've got the same 2 profiles. We have parts of this profile that have actually lost volume, which is shown in red. We have parts of this profile where, you know, this offshore trough has actually been filled in with sediment. So that's a net gain, or that's a gain in that section of the profile. And then we've got some additional loss offshore. So again, in this schematic, we would take the net of this loss here in red, this gain here in green, and this net or this loss of red out here, and we'd come up with a net volume change for each of these profiles. Okay, so just want to make sure that everybody understands what we're talking about when we talk about the shoreline change compared to the volume change. So this is just a summary. If you guys, I'll send a PDF of this. You can refer back to this, but this again kind of goes through in the 3 sections, the north section, central section, and south section. These are the boundaries. Townwide, we have changes that date back from December 2017 to June 2020. In that central and south section, basically from 3rd Avenue South, we have changes that date back to 2006. And then from 9th Avenue, which are those northern 3 profiles, we have changes that date back to September 2013. Okay, just a reference slide there. All right, so let's get into some updates, updated results. So in terms of the shoreline change, again, this is just picking a contour and measuring that distance. The average in the northern section, so we're talking about from 3rd Avenue North, we've got an average shoreline change rate of negative 2.3 feet per year. So that mean high water contour is moving basically landward between our first survey conducted in December 2017 and June 2020 at a rate of about 2.3 feet per year. Again, that's an average of all those profiles up there. There is some variability, that's all detailed in the report. Which profiles have a higher rate, which profiles have a lower rate. The average shoreline change rate, going back a little bit further, as I mentioned, we have those 3 profiles from basically 9th Avenue North. If you look at just that section, the average shoreline change rate in that section from 2013 to 2020 is a little less. It's minus 1.3 feet per year. So that's a longer term over about 7 years. If we move into the central section, which again is that area from about 3rd Avenue down to around Chickahawk Trail or just south of Chickahawk Trail, the average shoreline change rate, again, is about minus 2.3 feet per year from 2017 to 2020. So it's pretty much the same rate as we see up in the northern section between 2017 and 2020. And then if we drop down, remember we have data dating back to October 2006 for this section. If we go all the way back to 2006, the rate in this section is about half of that. It's about 1.3 feet per year, right? Again, we're just talking about shoreline change. And then in the south section, here's where we have the higher rates. So the average shoreline change rate in the short term, December 2017 to June 2020, was 10.8 feet in this section, right? So this is the section that includes, part of this section is the area that had sand placed in 2017. So typically the shoreline will erode a little bit faster after the project. So that explains some of the higher rates there. And then if we go back to 2006, we actually have a lower rate of any of these other rates, minus 1.1 feet per year. But you've got to realize that between 2006 and 2020, when we look at this rate, we've also placed material in that section in 2017. So that rate's a little bit lower because some of the erosion that occurred before the project was mitigated by the placement of sand that occurred during the project. Okay, a couple of slides real quick to talk about. I mentioned earlier this concept of usable beach width. And we had talked a little bit about this the last time I was up there, I think the beginning of 2020, I'm sorry. And so after we had modified the goals of the project to make sure that we provided usable beach width, we had to come up with a way of determining what that actual usable beach width was. And so by looking at the profiles and kind of conducting a couple of site visits, being familiar with that area, we determined that we were going to measure usable beach width based on the width, the linear distance between the plus 4 foot contour, which essentially if you're out walking on the beach, that's probably around where the wet dry line is, where you're walking the beach and you can see the difference between the dry sand and the wet sand. That's probably pretty close to the plus 4 foot contour. And then we would measure that distance horizontally up to where the toe of dune is, which on average is about the plus 12 foot contour. So when we put this profile into our program, we can ask the program to tell us what's the distance between the plus 12 foot contour and the plus 4 foot contour. Looking at it on the beach, this is a little bit more of what that would have looked like. So this picture was taken in 2019 at the Hillcrest Access. Essentially, that toe of dune is up here where this orange line is. The plus 4 foot contour would be further down here around where the stake is that I had set just to mark. Again, it's around the wet dry line, where that wet dry line would be. And this distance, this horizontal distance, if you created a flat plane through there, would represent some distance from the 12 foot to the 4 foot contour. Right, and so what we did was we measured that distance for every profile that we had surveyed along the town of Southern Shores. And in the northern section, we determined what the average width was for that usable beach. This is all based on all these data are based on 2019 surveys. So at that point in time, the northern section from 197 plus 12 to 157.41, those are stations up there. We've got an average usable beach, as we just defined, of 57 feet. But we also looked at the average along the rest of the town of Southern Shores. So from 3rd Avenue south, that average is closer to 84 feet. And if we actually, we also, just out of curiosity, we looked at the average width, usable beach width, as we just defined, for the entire area that sand was placed along during the 2017 project. So that's 2,000 feet into Southern Shores, all the way down to the Wright Brothers Memorial in Kildable Hills. That whole long stretch, if we were to take an average of that area, it was about 103 feet usable beach width, right? So one of the things that we wanted to do with this new data that we collected in 2020, again, these numbers are based on 2019 surveys. We wanted to update these and see where the usable beach width is in 2020. Now I didn't include, and we didn't make that calculation for the entire area that was nourished. Certainly something that we could provide the town. But what we did compare was that the rest of the town, from 150 to 0 plus 0, 0, the average usable beach width actually decreased in that section from 84 feet down to 69 feet. So if we take the average from 3rd Avenue South, we now have an average of 69 feet. And if we look at that northern section, which originally had a usable beach width of about 57 feet, the report states that we've actually gained about 12 feet of usable beach from the summer of 2019 to the summer of 2020. So when we conducted this original assessment in 2019 and we updated our recommendation to the town, we looked at the difference between this 57 and this 84, said, it's about 25 or 30 feet. If we were going to recommend anything, we would recommend placement of enough volume that we would widen this beach to get closer to the average, about 25 feet of an addition of beach up there. But if we were to have conducted that same analysis based on the 2019 data, we would say, well, there's really not a whole lot of difference between the usable beach width in the north area and the usable beach within the rest of the town. All right, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. I just want to put that out there. So now we're talking about the volume change. I went through all those shoreline change, the measurement of the contour. Now we're actually talking about how much volume, how much sand is moving around all the way out to that depth of closure offshore. So in the northern section, between 2017, our first townwide survey, and June 2020, the rate is actually a gain of plus 6.1 cubic yards per foot per year. I know that sometimes that's a difficult number or unit for folks to wrap their head around, but basically a linear foot of beach, we're losing 6 cubic yards along 1 foot of oceanfront beach per year. That's the rate. I'm sorry, we're gaining 6.1 cubic yards per foot per year in the northern section. And then again, we reference this 2013 date where we've got a couple of profiles from 9th Avenue North. If we just look at those longer term data from 2013 to 2020, the rate is essentially no change, negative 0.2 cubic yards per foot per year in that northern section from 9th Avenue North. Okay, that's over a 7-year, 6.75 year period. If we look at the central section, again from 3rd Avenue down to Chickahawk Trail, now we're looking at an average volume change rate from the December 2017 date to June 2020 of more or less 0, no change, negative 0.3 cubic yards per foot per year. All right, so we're pretty stable in terms of December 2017 to June 2020. If we back up in that central section all the way to 2006, we've actually gained a little bit of sand. We're plus 2.7 cubic yards per foot per year for the long-term range. All right, now the south section is where we really want to concentrate our focus here. The south section, which includes the area where sand was placed in 2017, we've got an average volume change rate between 2017 and 2020 of negative 15.3 cubic yards per foot. All right, so it's noticeably higher than any of the other rates we've been talking about. But if we back up to 2006 and we look at it, the rate is fairly constant over that section, over that 14-year period But again, we have to remember that this low average rate is also including the adding of sand that occurred in 2017. So one of the things that I also point out on this slide is the overall average along the central and the south section. So everything south of 3rd Avenue was, if we add this rate and this rate, and we take the average of all of it, all of that area, it's essentially negative 5.2 cubic yards per foot per year that we're measuring that we've lost between December 2017 and June 2020. And that negative 5.2 cubic yards per foot is a little bit of an increase of what I would have reported to you last year if we were just looking at the 2019 data. At that point in time, we had a negative 3 cubic yard per foot per year average. A year later in this section from 3rd Avenue South, the rate has gone up a little bit. It's negative 5.2 cubic yards per foot per year. So the reason that number is important is because that number goes into what we call our advanced fill volume. So this is a table that was pulled out of the latest report that was provided to the town back in, I think, January of 2020, when we updated all of our alternatives based on potentially providing or potentially including a fill project on the northern section of town. And so what we have here in the first column is the design volume. This is how much material we would add to the project to provide the level of protection we were shooting for. The diffusion loss volume is basically when you place sand out on a beach, that sand is going to erode away a little faster than the natural beach would, because you've created essentially a bump in the shoreline, and nature wants to try to smooth that bump out. So the diffusion loss is essentially the increase in the erosion that you're expecting because you've created this bump in the shoreline. And then the advanced fill volume essentially is the sacrificial sand you're placing out in front of your design volume that's there, so that 5 years after the project is built, you've lost that sacrificial sand, but you still have this design volume in place that's providing you your more long-term protection. Okay. And so the reason I bring that up is that this 225,000 cubic yards was based on the erosion rate that was measured between 2017 and 2019, which I just told you was negative 3 cubic yards per foot. As we look at the 2020 data, that rate is actually a little bit higher. And so if we were to recalculate this advanced fill based on a higher rate, that volume would actually go up. Even if your design stayed the same, this rate, this volume could potentially go up, okay, which could increase your volume, your total volume, I'm sorry. So I've shown these slides a couple of times before, but because of the discussion that I just went through in terms of the advanced fill and the design fill, this schematic really helps folks understand the difference in the fill and how these projects are constructed. And so this project essentially shows a schematic with no beach project whatsoever. And so the way that this project is constructed is that, hypothetically speaking, if we were to construct a dune, we've got a dune, we've got a dry sand beach, a berm here, which is part of the design. And then we've got a couple of these other wedges out here. And what this is to visualize is that this section, this outer portion, this wedge of sand, essentially is sand that is expected to move out into the offshore area and basically re-nourish the offshore portion of the beach. But it's going to move out there through natural processes over the course of typically maybe 3 to 6 months up in the Outer Banks. And then this second wedge here is meant to show the sacrificial sand that is in front of the design that's expected to erode away over the course of whatever your re-nourishment event, your re-nourishment interval is. And so if we believe the erosion rate is higher, this wedge actually has to include more volume. And so this next slide, this actually says adjustment over 6 to 18 months. This is showing that material moving offshore. So now the project is equilibrated, but you see the difference in this width here. This is something that we talk to folks all the time about, where they see this volume move offshore and they feel like all of that sand that was placed on the beach has now been lost. It hasn't been lost. It's moved to the offshore portion of the profile to renourish that part of the beach on purpose. But from a PR standpoint, sometimes that can look like, hey, half of the sand that was placed out there just went away. So now, now this schematic here shows that we've got a design volume, and we still have this advanced fill out here in front of the design volume. That's what these arrows are here to show. And then over time, whatever your renourishment interval is, you would expect that that advanced fill to go away. But the idea is that you're maintaining that design beach in place, which is an improved beach of what you had prior to the construction of the project. And so when we talk about these volumes, this would be that amount that it takes to build the design, whereas this volume here is that sacrificial sand that's going away during the 5-year renourishment period. All right, so getting close to the end here, this is a summary table that was provided in the last report, that update, Addendum A, we call the Beach Management Update Addendum A, that was provided last January. These volumes and these dollar amounts have not changed at this point in time. We're kind of in the middle of the design process and looking at a couple of different options. So I don't have updated numbers. The alternative 4 is essentially the last direction that we received from the town. So alternative 4 includes placement along the entire town. It requires about 878,300 cubic yards of sand. We've got some different construction costs and monitoring costs and contingencies, but essentially the number that we're looking at for the project right now, without changing anything, is that $14.8 million number. All right. So the last slide that I've got here is just an update on where we are with the 2022 proposed project. What you see here is a schedule that's been provided to the town a couple of times through some of our beach nourishment working group meetings that we have with some of the other towns. Essentially, those first couple of line items have not changed. The borrow area development, just a quick update on that. As in part of the construction, or in part of the permitting and design contract that we had with the town, as well as the other 3 towns, was a sand investigation survey that was meant to go out and look at another offshore portion of the region up there that showed potential for sand to be used for the 2022 project. Now we've got a large borrow site that's located offshore of Kill Devil Hills that has enough sand to build the Duck project, the proposed Southern Shores project, the Kitty Hawk project, and the Kill Devil Hills project. But we wanted to try to see if there was a borrow site that would be a little closer to Southern Shores and Duck that we could use to decrease the cost of the project. And so last year we spent some time looking at existing data, came up with a survey plan to go out and investigate an area offshore of Southern Shores and northern Kitty Hawk. Those investigations were done back in October of 2020. And essentially, we got through the first phase of that survey, and the results showed that the material that we were targeting was actually a lot darker in color and a lot finer in content than what we were hoping to find. And so at that point in time, we did not move forward with the second phase of that investigation. We cut it off there because we really didn't believe that moving forward would result in us being able to design a borrow area that would be used for the project and ultimately bring down the cost. So we kind of took the cost savings of that, and we did collect some additional reconnaissance data down around the borrow area that we will be using, which may help us out in the future. But essentially, the borrow area development is complete at this point in time. The engineering design. The red numbers are numbers that I've changed since the last time the schedule was provided. So originally we had an engineering design period from June till about January, where we are right now. We're running about 3 months behind with the design right now. But the modeling's taken a little bit longer, and we just want to fine tune a few more things. So right now we're looking at a completion date of around April of this year to finalize that design. And then, but one of the driving parts of this schedule is to make sure that the permitting stays on schedule. Because ultimately what we're driving at in the schedule is that we want to bid this project out sometime around July and August so that we can open bids. The contractors can look at this project, submit their bids, essentially about 9 or 10 months prior to construction, so that we don't wait until the contractors have no, dredge capacity to actually build this project in 2022. It's something that the Nags Head project and our 2017 project have learned over time, that a project of this size really needs to be bid out early enough to provide sufficient lead-in time for these contractors to look at their backlog and to provide an affordable, essentially an affordable cost to build these projects. We want to bid them out fairly early. So again, going back, the permitting is essentially on schedule. The federal permitting is on schedule. We have moved the state permitting back about a month. Originally, that was January to June. Now we've got February to July. We're in the process right now of submitting a couple of the state permit applications, probably sometime, maybe one of them today. The Town of Ducks application is about ready to be submitted. We may submit a couple more today or earlier this week. And essentially that process is that we submit a draft to the state. They're going to take a look at it. We'll have a sit down with their rep. We'll go over any modifications in that application that need to be made. We anticipate submitting final applications probably sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks to them. So if we can get those submitted, the max turnaround time that the state has once that application is deemed complete is 150 days. Typically, they've been able to better that 150 days by a few weeks. So we're still hoping that we'll have permits in place sometime around June or July of 2021. And then that other date next to development of construction plans and specs, that's sort of the next phase of this. That's when we'll start developing the bid package that'll be used to solicit bids from the contractors. We anticipate that process will start around March of this year, and it should be completed by June 2021 so that we can get those bids out. Again, that third from last item, solicitation of bids, that's really the key here. We want to keep that window sometime between June and August and open those bids sometime in July or August, so that we can go ahead and award that contract, and we're on schedule for the October 2022 or the 2022 May to October construction period. All right, that was a lot. That's all I've got in terms of slides. Be happy to go back and answer any questions that you'll have.
Thank you, Ken. We'll see if we have questions we want to ask you. Just give us a minute or so. Council?
You have any questions?
I've got a few, but you start.
Ken, can you go back to the volume change slide, please?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you add the central and south sections, to get that average of 5.2, you're only taking the 17 to 20 data, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, you're not going back to the 06.
Correct.
Why do you exclude the north section from that?
Because the north section's got an actual increase in volume, and
You think
if we add that, we're gonna bring the average down, so much that we may be underrepresenting the amount of advanced fill that we may need in other places. It's sort of a conservative decision
okay.
in not including that northern section.
And you didn't go with just the southern section because it would overrepresent advanced fill necessary?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. There is an expectation that as we get closer and closer to the 2022 project, that the 2021 data and the 2022 data may show a decrease in that volume. That's pretty typical that you would see, a tapering off of these higher erosion rates that you see shortly after you've added material. Although I think when you look at the average in the south section, we've seen a little bit of an increase from 2019 to 2020. But typically the trend, and we're seeing that in at the town of Duck and the town of Kitty Hawk and Kildable Hills, that as you get further and further into these projects, that rate comes down a little bit. So,
So the
I
first
mean,
year is
if we
steep
were assuming that average of 15.3 cubic yards per foot per year, I mean, we're going to drive the cost of the project, the volume of the project way up.
Yeah, okay. And is that 15.3 representative of the advanced fill for the original design of the south section?
No, so that's a good question. In terms of the design of the south section, and I'm assuming you're talking about the project that was placed out there in 2017. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the project that was placed out there in 2017 didn't really have that design and advanced fill sort of schematic that I had showed before. It wasn't really designed, so to speak, that way, because it was more of a stopgap project, an emergency project. Essentially, all that we placed out there was advanced fill.
Okay.
So the volume would have been pretty close to I think it would have been pretty close to 6 cubic yards per linear foot, assuming like a loss rate of 6 cubic yards. I think what we ended up placing was about 30 cubic yards per linear foot. So if you just divide that by 5, we're around a loss of 6 per year.
Mhm.
If you go in and you actually look at the profile data for the profiles that are in that section that was renourished, that's pretty close to the rate of what we're losing sand at. It's pretty close to that 5 or 6 cubic yards per year. Some of the higher rates are actually just north of where the project was constructed. Maybe 1,000 or 2,000 feet north. We've got a bunch of tables that kind of show that data for every single profile in the report, in the draft report that was provided. But I can certainly go back and kind of dig into that a little bit. But I think that 15.3 is actually being driven by some rates that are just north of where sand was placed, not necessarily inside of where the sand was placed.
And those different transects are in the draft report?
Correct.
Okay, I'll
Correct.
take a look at that. And then how does that compare with the other towns' erosion rate for their projects?
If we're talking about the 6 cubic yards or 5 or 6 cubic yards, that's pretty consistent with the other towns. I'd say most of them are within the 6 to 10 cubic yards range in terms of what we have for data from December 27 to June 2020.
Ken, this is Jim Connors. I got a couple questions for you, actually 3 of them. The first one is when this project goes out to bid, do they give a per cubic yard cost in case things either increase or decrease?
Yes, sir. So it won't be a lump sum. It won't be a lump sum contract. There will be a lump sum total for the mobilization cost and demobilization cost. And the way that we did that in 2017 is that mob and demob is one number for the entire 4 towns project.
Right.
So the contractor will provide that one number, and then the contractor will also provide a unit cost of the volume for each individual town. So the towns will have, most likely the towns would have different unit costs for sand. And then they actually pay based on, the actual surveys that are conducted before a station is constructed and after a station is constructed. And you actually can compute that volume, down to the single cubic yard, and they get paid based on that volume times their rate.
Okay, I understand mobilization costs and most likely others will be separate and everything, but there's something that we can use to adjust our budgeting and everything, or?
That's correct. And the other thing that you're trying to hit here is that the beach itself is, the goalposts are moving, so to speak, on the beach all the time. And
Right.
so we will have a volume that we're recommending in the bid documents if those numbers come back, if their unit costs come back higher than expected, within reason, you could decrease that volume, stay on budget. If they're lower than expected, you could increase that volume. And then because this is being bid out 10 months prior to construction, when the time comes to do your pre-construction survey, those numbers will probably change a little bit anyway. And so the engineers are constantly working with the dredge contractors to modify, literally on the fly as they're building the project, to modify the next section of beach to make sure that we're balancing, the set budget for the project with the changing conditions on the beach.
Okay. The second question I had was regarding the bid. When this project goes out to bid, I think from June, July of 2021. Let me try and formulate this question. This may be a question more for our town manager, but our budgets have got to be adopted by July 1st. So we're on this first go round, we're going to have to formulate budgets, which also impacts the tax rates set for the municipal service districts, et cetera, before these initial bids come back. Do you feel comfortable we can do that? I'm asking our town manager that.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Based on that 14 million or close to $15 million project budget number, we can set our July 1 budget for the municipal service districts to accumulate the revenue to pay that amount.
Okay.
And then, of course, we may have to adjust. But if we're looking at a maximum fill and the council decides that the project's not going to go above $15 million, then we can put the amount of fill to equal that dollar amount on the beach. But we can adjust up or down the tax rate, as you know, each year. But I think to answer your question, yes, sir, that first year, we would be setting the tax rate to generate the revenue for a $15 million project or whatever you all decide.
Okay. And then my final question to you, Ken, is this presentation was a lot to digest, and I think I've done a fair job of digesting it all, but would like to try more. Can you give us that presentation, your slides, so that we can view this on our own with that presentation with the recorded meeting?
Absolutely. And I think Cliff's got a copy of the draft report as well. We were kind of going back and forth. He had asked me, should we provide the final report? And so I think what we had decided is we wanted to get comments from you all during this meeting, and if there's anything substantive that needs to be reevaluated in the report, we can make those final modifications. But the draft report is it's in a good shape, and Cliff's got a copy of that. That can be distributed as well.
Again, I only ask that so that I or any other council members up here can really digest a lot of this stuff even better.
Sure. And that's why some of these slides they've got a lot of text on them, because I figured at some point somebody wanted to go back and take a look at them.
Yeah. Your presentation is great, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to get back into the volume change part of your presentation, Ken. As a person who doesn't think about how much sand there is offshore very often, because when I go to the beach, I see what I see, which is what I can walk on.
Sure.
So a couple of follow-up questions about why a person in your business is so focused on this volume change that's offshore. I understand that at least part of it would be storm mitigation, storm resistance, I guess. So I guess I'm asking to confirm that. Is that how you all as engineers think about it?
Yeah, so there's kind of two things. So one, you can think of that sand in the offshore portion almost like building a foundation of a house or a building. And so if you place all that sand out there on the upper part of the beach, you've essentially built a bigger structure than your foundation can support. And so nature is going to move some of that sand offshore to try to create its own foundation that will actually hold up that beach. And so that we understand that whether we like it or not, that's going to happen, and we need to account for that movement of sand into the offshore. The other part of why that's important, and it's not just dead sand that nobody knows about that's sitting out there that you paid a bunch of money for, is that when a wave breaks as it's approaching from deep water, that wave is breaking in a certain depth of water, depending on how big the wave is. And so, a large wave that's coming in offshore, you want that wave to break, several times before it actually hits your beach. You wouldn't want that huge wave. You look at these buoy data that are off of Duck, and you see during these big storms, waves that are, 15 meters or 20 meters high. You don't want that wave coming anywhere close to your house. You want it breaking multiple times. And so if you can make the water depths offshore of your beach shallower, further out, then those waves are breaking further offshore of your beach. And the amount of energy that actually makes it to your beach, even when you go out there and you see just whitewash all over the beach, there's a lot of energy that's been broken up before that wave actually made it to that beach and the water runs up, to the dune or what have you. And so you really want as much of that energy dissipated offshore as possible. And that's another reason why it is important to understand how that sand is moving offshore and sort of rebuilding those bars that are offshore your beach that no one really ever sees.
Okay, that really helped me understand. I hope it helped other people as well. Okay, so following up, the sand that we're placing or that we're measuring offshore, lots of people, when you get into discussions about these projects, they say, well, all that sand's just going to go south and block Oregon Inlet. So can you give us any engineering data that says that what happens to that sand that's in the offshore position?
Yeah, some of the modeling that we're doing and some of the monitoring that probably better to look at some of the monitoring that's been done down in Nags Head than this. This sand that we would place out in Southern Shores has a long way to go before it gets down to Oregon Inlet. And sand does move south, and sand also moves north depending on the wave direction on any given period. A lot of the big tropical storms and hurricanes that you guys might experience, like Hurricane Dorian, most of that, the wind direction is coming out of the south on those storms. And so during those times, you've actually got sand moving to the north. Whereas in the winter, when folks are used to seeing those nor'easters out there, the sand is moving from north to south. I haven't seen anything that suggests that, that there's a clear correlation of, when that project was built in Nags Head that placed, 4 million cubic yards of sand along their beach back in 2011, that somehow the rates of shoaling in Oregon Inlet have changed because of that. We don't have to do anything to the beaches, and Oregon Inlet is going to shoal. There's a desire to have a channel in Oregon Inlet deeper than what the natural flow velocities through that inlet would actually, would allow to be maintained. And so it's always going to require dredging of Oregon Inlet if they want to maintain a 200-foot or 300-foot wide channel and 14-foot deep or whatever their target is down there. It will always require dredging of that channel. And there just isn't. Anecdotally, it's easy to say, hey, the sand goes north, so every time we put sand on the beach, we're clogging up Oregon Inlet. But the data just doesn't show that there's a correlation between the project in Nags Head being constructed and the shoaling rates that can be measured down in Oregon Inlet.
Thank you. I appreciate that too. So generally, I know this is what engineers don't like to do, but could you give us your best guess about an expectation of the dry or usable beach after a project is completed for our Southern Shores Beach?
Well, I think it depends on, I think it also depends on the grain size of the material that's up there. What we have noticed from the sampling that we've done is that the grain size up there is, it's a little coarser. So the grains that on average are a little bit bigger than the sand in other parts of the town. And I think that's one of the reasons why the beach tends to be a little bit steeper up there. I think there was also some work that was done by some researchers through the field research facility that took some core borings in that section up there, and it looks like even the dune has some coarser material in it than other parts of the dune along the town. And so I think, you know, the sand source that we have offshore of Kitty Hawk or Kill Devil Hills is probably going to be a little bit finer than the material up there, which typically will actually flatten out the beach a little bit. And so the morphology of the beach in and of itself, the slope of the beach in and of itself up there may end up being a little flatter than it is now with the addition of this sand that's a little bit finer. In terms of the performance of that beach, I mean, we're using the best data that we have available, but we see the difference in the 2019 data that I showed you in that slide that showed that, you know, yes, that area is a lot narrower than the rest of the beach, but, you know, a year later it shows that beach is about the same on average of the rest of the beach. And so I think there are natural changes that are going on up there, that all we can do is take the data that we have and try to best predict it. But I mean, adding sand to the beach, you know, is going to help widen that beach for sure. It looks like the erosion rates up there are you know, fairly stable. You know, so maybe we don't lose that advanced fill as fast as, you know, we might lose it in other parts of projects or other parts of the Southern Shores project. But it does seem to be a pretty dynamic area up there that's changing a lot.
Thank you. Just a couple more. Generally, would you say that the cost of these projects, since the first one was done, as Nag said, have generally gone up over the last 10 years?
So that there's a couple of factors to that. I would say not so much looking at the Nags Head project, but looking at the Duck and the Kill Devil Hills and the Kitty Hawk project. So one of the slides that I showed, so essentially when you build this first project, you have to build this design and you have to place this material that's going to move offshore, and you're placing this advanced fill out there. Okay. So at the end of your renourishment cycle, sort of like where we are with Duck and Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk, you're getting close to only having your design beach left. But when it comes time to renourish the beach, all you're placing is that maintenance material. So ideally, you don't have to rebuild this section. Now, I will tell you that there are parts of the town of Duck where we're going to have to rebuild some of this design section because the advanced fill, the rates of erosion of the project were higher than you know what we had originally based our predictions off of, based on the data that we had. So there are some parts of Duck where we may have to rebuild this the bottom of the dune and some of the berm, but we're not rebuilding the entire design, certainly in other projects as well. And so when you renourish the project, the volume that you're placing should be considerably less than that first initial construction project, because essentially all you're doing is placing that advanced fill back. And so the difference between your first project and your second project should go down. And the estimates that we're using for Duck and Kitty Hawk and Kill Devil Hills certainly plays that out. This will be the initial construction of the Southern Shores project, but in the future, you would expect that if you're only placing maintenance material on there, that volume, that cost of future projects will go down. However, there's certainly inflation, and that's something that's pretty well tracked. We have some inflation values in there for the equipment and for the dredging costs, where we are increasing our unit costs and are increasing our expected mobilization costs based on those industry factors of what we expect to see in inflation.
Is your sand source running out?
I mean, offshore sand, it is in essence a finite resource. I mean, would you ever run out if money wasn't an option? I would say no. There are always going to be places to go, but all of these projects are based on trying to balance, the economics of how much these projects cost with the benefit that you're getting in return. And so, if at some point in time the only sand that we have is to go down to, Cape Hatteras, the shoal offshore of Cape Hatteras, then that project's going to become unattainable from an economic standpoint. If we have to go up offshore of Sandbridge, Virginia, those costs are going to increase. So we continue to look at that. I mean, we have enough volume in that offshore bar area, certainly to build this project, maybe to build another project 5 years from now. But between now and the next project, there will need to be some additional investigation to figure out, are there additional sand sources? The cheapest source is always the closest one. So, we've sort of exhausted the ones that are the closest. Once we've got a good handle on, where those future sand sources may be, then we can reassess the long-term estimates of, what those projects would cost if we have to bring sand from further away.
I promise this is my last question. I apologize to my fellow council members for taking so much of the time this morning. How many contractors do you expect to bid on the project here in June?
We would hope for at least 3. There could be maybe 4. I would say that in all of the U.S., it probably caps out at maybe 5 contractors that could build a project of this size. The last time we bid the project, I believe we ended up having to bid it twice. But the last time that we bid the project, I believe we got 3 contractors both times that we did that. So we're hoping 3, at least 3 bidders, but there really are only maybe 4 or 5 that could do this project.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, if I could follow up, this is inspired by a question that Elizabeth had asked.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Ken, I wasn't speaking in the mic, but my question now is inspired by one of Elizabeth's questions. A year or 2 ago, I went to these 4 days of seminars at the Corps of Engineers Research Facility in Duck, and they showed they did one whole presentation on wave dynamics. My question to you is, would it be possible to show a slide or 2 on those wave dynamics as it relates to advanced fill? The one thing that I remember is that the wave height is roughly equal to that energy flow below the water level, and how that advanced fill could help break up that energy flow getting onto, before it. I'm not saying that very well, but do you know what I'm talking about?
We've got a graphic that I've shown, some other colleagues have shown in presentations before, that sort of look at like a hypothetical wave, a storm wave, and where, based on the pre-project condition and the post-project condition, how much further offshore that wave would break. It kind of illustrates that point that I think you're talking about.
Yes, and I think that
we do have
a
a graphic
graphic
that
like
kinda
that
shows
may help us understand the importance of that advanced fill area. But anyway, it's just for your consideration, but I think that would help a lot of people understand the whole purpose for that advanced fill.
I have one more.
Advanced fill went in, is what saved Pelican Rush. We didn't do any replacement or anything beyond just offshore sand.
Yeah.
And then made the beach with water, so we dissipate some of that energy. I'm sorry.
Did the sand that we lost down here on the southern part,
Sir?
the sand that we lost in the southern section, did that,
You're breaking up a little bit.
What's that?
somebody's talking behind me. Ken?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, the sand that we lost on the southern portion, that was sand we put there in our renourishment, there 3 years ago, did that all end up out, further out into the ocean and reduce the wave action?
Yeah, so anytime we're placing sand, we're sort of placing it in this configuration. So when we place that sand, certainly a portion of that sand after it was constructed did move down into this offshore portion. I guess the difference in the way that this graphic is shown is that there wasn't really a design portion of that beach. It was really just the advanced fill portion. And so as time goes along, we're getting closer and closer to the condition that we were at prior to the project being constructed. Now the project did build a pretty wide flat dune there, or a pretty big wide dry sand beach, and then the town installed that sand fencing along that section. And that sand fencing, I think there have been at least 2 rows, maybe 3 rows that have been placed there. They captured a lot of sand and have rebuilt that dune back on its own through sort of natural wind processes. But yes, for sure, when the project was built, it was built like this, and immediately after construction. I know your project was built sometime in August of 2017, and in September of 2017, I think we had 3 hurricanes that passed, way offshore, but certainly produced enough wave energy in the near shore that the dredges ended up shutting down for a good chunk of the month of September. And it took a while for them to get restarted and finish the Kitty Hawk project. But so your project would have been built like this in August, and I would say within a month that equilibration had occurred to where that sand had moved offshore. And then you're dealing with the situation where you're just losing some of that advanced fill as time goes by.
Okay. So in this project, that whole section's having to be redesigned?
Correct. So we're looking at how much of a design we would actually place down there along that southern section, in addition to placing 3 or 4 or 5 cubic yards per linear foot per year of advanced fill in front of that design. So that's correct.
Did it make sense, Leo?
Yeah, I'm following it. I didn't realize that we hadn't designed it like I thought we did. Okay. That's all I got.
Anyone else have any questions?
I just have one request, and it's probably already carried out, but we haven't seen the report. On each individual station survey, do you have the linear footage of the 12 MSL to 4 MSL for the dry beach?
I don't know if that's in the report. It's certainly a table that I could provide you in an email to be easy to digest, but I think we just talk about averages in the report.
What's that? I'm sorry, Ken.
I said, I think we just talk about averages in the report. I don't think there is a table that has those individual profiles, but we've got it all here in Excel on our server. I could certainly provide you a table that shows those per profile
Per station.
measurements. Yep.
That would be helpful, I think, especially just in communication with what's interacting with the dry beach between these surveys. Do you have them across the 06 to 17 to 19, or you just do 17 to 19?
For the usable beach?
Yes.
So think of the usable beach. It's not really a comparison between one year and the other. The usable beach is really it's a one point in time reading. So I could go back and we could calculate the reading for what the data shows in 2006. Although the 2006 data only goes up to station to 3rd Avenue.
Okay.
So we wouldn't have that northern section, but I don't know if we looked at it previously. We can go back to 2013 and at least look at the northern 2,000 feet of beach, basically from 9th Avenue north. We could look at where that was in 2013.
The 9th is 157?
Correct.
Okay.
The 9th is 170.
Is that high?
177.13.
Okay.
So this is the section we could go back to
I got you.
2013. Okay. And I mean, as I'm kind of thinking this through, we've got LiDAR data that goes back to 1996, I think, that because we're only looking at that dry sand beach, we could probably pull those numbers dating back to 1996 for the entire shoreline as well, and look at that usable beach width and how it's changed.
Like I'm looking at your past report and looking at 177, you know, in 2013, it showed probably a pretty good horizontal distance between 12 and 4, and then it retreats pretty significantly to 17, then it comes back a little bit in 19. I'm assuming it might have even come back a little bit in 20. So I just think that's helpful for us communicating to our citizenry who that is the part of the beach they see primarily.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the report is, like I said, it's in draft form, and maybe that is something that we want to take a look at. I mean, it could spend a couple of hours grabbing those numbers and writing those into the report.
If that can be done without a whole host of extra labor, I think it would be a useful communication tool.
Okay, no, I agree. I agree.
We had a couple bullet points here. One of them was 2020 annual monitoring report by UCAN, and the other was design and environmental permitting services 2022 beach nourishment project. Do you want to discuss that in more detail?
These here.
I'm just looking at my agenda.
Oh, your agenda. I guess I've kind of mixed that in. I mean, if folks have additional questions about the design environmental, I mean, I went into a little bit of detail about the federal permitting and the state permitting, where we are with getting these applications in. I mean, one of the things that I'll elaborate a little bit on is originally, you know, everything backs up to that solicitation of bids and trying to award the contracts and when we open bids, really. And so we've been very careful about making sure we submit our permit applications to give the resource agencies sufficient time to review. But if you look and see, okay, we're going to submit these state permits in February 2021, but my other bullet in engineering design says I'm not going to be done with the design until April 2021. So how can you have that lag if you're submitting a permit application? What we're doing, and this isn't just for Southern Shores, this is for all three towns. In order to keep on this schedule, we're submitting permit applications that include, for the other three towns, constructing essentially the same template that was built last time, plus some sand that was lost during Hurricane Dorian for the town of Kildare Hills and the town of Duck that they're eligible for FEMA funding for. Plus, we're also looking at increasing that advanced fill based on the actual erosion rates that we've seen since 2017. And so we're sort of casting a large net out there to permit the largest potential, the largest project that we could foresee. And that's what we're trying to include in these permit applications that are going out in the next couple of weeks. Whereas over the course of the next couple of months, we'll be fine tuning a couple of specific design issues that we have in Kitty Hawk and Kildare Hills and Duck, and then finalizing this design for the town of Southern Shores in terms of figuring out where those areas based on updated data that are most vulnerable and what that design volume should be as compared to what that advanced fill maintenance volume should be. So we're working on fine tuning that, and what we need is all of those designs done in order to determine the volume that we actually want to bid the project at, which will probably be less than the volume that's permitted to place, if you're following me there. So we're kind of casting a big net on these permits, making sure that it's kind of all encompassing, includes the max, extent volume that we can foresee. And then working on tweaking the design over the next couple of months so that when we put the project out to bid, we've got those final designs.
Thank you. Cliff, do you have any questions of Ken?
No, but if he could, if you've got time, if you're able, can you stay on as we go through the discussion of the municipal service district? There may be some overlap.
Sure, I was planning on it.
Okay.
I'm going to maybe mess that up. I hope not. I'd like to take about a 5 to 7 minute recess here, just,
That's great.
all right, council. Let's say a 7 minute recess. Try to be back here about 10, whatever it is, 20, 25. Everybody had the same idea, I bet.
There you go.
Cliff, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, sir. One thing I'd like to go back and clarify or add to the Councilman Connor's question about collecting the tax July 1, if we do that, then that's assuming we're under contract next fiscal year. So if we start collecting taxes on July 1 to pay for the project, we got to be under contract. We have to have a project to pay for. Now, or I think we could be in jeopardy of having to give some of that money, that tax money back, if not all of it. We can tax and have some fund balance in the beach nourishment fund. So if you were to set a tax rate and the project come in under budget, and it's within reason, you can maintain that tax rate and accumulate some fund balance for the next project. The statutes, I don't think, are clear on how much fund balance. So there's the ability to keep the tax rate the same this first fiscal year, even if the project comes in less than, say, $15 million.
Estimated.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I was mostly just making sure that Cliff had
Yeah.
that covered.
The other thing, and Ken, are you on?
Yes.
Okay. The contract that we're under with Ken right now takes us to about close to the end here, and we're going to have to sign a new contract with Ken for the oversight and administration of the project. And so that I think that could be, if for whatever reason we're not under contract to do a nourishment project, we will be under contract for beach nourishment. And though I don't think we could set the tax rate as high, there's a purpose for the municipal service district under that contract. But the main point there was to let you know Ken's going to be sending another contract soon. So for the purposes of today's further discussion about the municipal service district, what I put in your packet, there's three options, but they pretty much all kind of center on what I have on the screen now. And you'll see that for no reason, I chose blue and red here. Probably not the best time to choose blue and red, but nevertheless, what is the assumption here is in the blue, the municipal service district 1 are all the properties that abut the ocean front, and MSD 2 are all the properties east of NC 12 and properties west of NC 12 from the southern town line up to where the road splits. The idea being that these are the properties that receive the greatest benefit from the beach nourishment project. Now, and also in your packet, you'll see the assumption being that we're still following the same need for revenue generation or today that we were when the Carters last spoke to you in January of last year. And that is, the assumption being we're going to get about $11 million from Dare County, and we're going to need to generate about $6.2 million over 5 years from the municipal service districts, or roughly $1.25 million a year. So that's what this is based on. Now, you don't have to make any decisions today, and I don't think that you should. You've got a lot that Ken just told you that you need to digest, but we're going to have to get to the point where we start to initiate the process, and the process takes some time. If you were to direct staff on February 2nd, your next council meeting, to put the report out that's required, that's in your packet, that describes who's the boundaries, what the benefit is, and the project to administer that benefit, and of course advertise for the public hearing, we have 4 weeks that we have to advertise that notice. And so that's 4 weeks after everyone in the district has received notification that they're proposed to be in a municipal service district. So let's say it takes us to the end of the week. 4 weeks from that point, it's almost, well, we're not going to be able to meet the March 3rd deadline. I think March 2nd would be exactly 4 weeks from the day you initiated the process to your next meeting. So we're looking at sometime maybe March 16th would be your mid-month, and you could have a public hearing then, which would, or you could have a special meeting. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're doing this, because a public hearing for this is a pretty significant event for the town, and it's something I know you're going to want to be able to take every opportunity to hear from as much of the public as you can. It's going to be really hard to do that under these circumstances. And so I think we need to really be thinking about the public hearing for this and the timing of it and how we're going to administer that. So really the point being there is that we need, I think in February, to be thinking about, because of the timing, we should really start the process of advertising and letting people know that this is coming and what's coming. So for purposes of today, what I wanted to show you is you've got what I'll call some specific kind of decision points of properties that you have to consider. Are you going to include them? Are you not going to include them, and where you're going to include them? And I zeroed in here on the 27 beach nourishment project was paid for by special assessment, and outlined here on this map shows you those properties that were included. They were all taxed the same. And what I proposed was if you were to put properties in the first MSD1, if only the properties that abut the ocean, you'll see some of these properties here wouldn't be included. And so the thought being in 2017 is that they all, I think, received the same benefit, so we're going to tax them all the same. If you were to apply that to this, then the properties that I have included in red would become blue, even though they don't touch the ocean, because essentially, and the reason I'm pointing this out is in 2017, you taxed them all the same amount. If you didn't do that for this project, then if we left it red, then those properties that are red are receiving less of a benefit, although they're receiving a benefit, but they're still receiving less of a benefit than if they were blue. Hopefully that makes sense. Because if you were to say, okay, you're right, we need to treat everyone in 2022 or 2021 the same we did in 2017, then all those properties would be in MSD1, which then I think would mean that these properties that also don't abut the ocean would also be in Municipal Service District 1 under the same argument or same justification. And that, that would go on up the beach to about Mullet Circle. So that's one particular place I think you have a decision to make, to me, that stands out. Also, the assumption in MSD2 for the southern end of town includes all the properties that abut NC12. Now, one thing I need to show, part of the justification of this is, if you look at the county tax map and how they tax land, you'll see that there's a greater benefit. All these properties that are shaded a different color are taxed at a higher rate because of the ocean influence. And of course, the further you get away from the ocean, the less of an impact, the less of an influence it has on the value of your property. But our MSDs pretty much mirror what you see on the county's tax map here. Now, with an exception being, you come down, one of the exceptions being, if you come down to the south end, all those properties along 12, those dark blue properties, are taxed at a higher value. And that's what we've included in our second MSD.
MSD2.
Right. But if you go back, so I think the question here is, which of these properties, how far to the southern end of town do you go on the west side of NC12? I've included all of these properties that abut NC12 are included in that tax. And then, one of the examples shows there's 3 options in here, and of course there's plenty of other ones that you could come up with. One just being the oceanfront, another one being the oceanfront plus about 2 rows of houses back, and then a third being all the properties that are east of NC12. They're taxed higher, they receive a better benefit, they have direct access to the ocean. they receive a greater benefit.
Cliff,
Sorry.
those ocean influence properties on the county level, they're not taxed higher, they're given a higher valuation.
That's what I meant. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Just
Everyone gets
what-
the
what
same
everybody-
tax.
Yeah.
And that's,
Same rate, just a higher value.
yeah, their value.
They're given
is high.
credit or property value because of the ocean influence.
Thank you for that clarification, because that's a point that everyone in each one of these MSDs has to receive the same tax rate. You can't tax someone who has a rental property more or less than someone who doesn't have a rental property. So the type is the same, the tax is the same, but the value is greater because of the ocean. So I thought I was going to say a whole lot more than I just did, but I think that pretty much captures the point or what I need to put in front of you. Obviously, things that if you were, and I put in there the assumption of what a tax rate would be for each one of these options based on the value. Obviously, if you take value out of one of these, the tax rate goes up. Put value in, the tax rate goes down. Another assumption that I have in here is that the MSDs would pay 75% of the roughly $1.2 million we need to generate, and the town-wide would be 25% of that revenue. Now, you can change that, and I've got the formulas in here that you can kind of change those and see. You may decide that it's 65-35. You can split that however you choose. And also, it's important to note that MSD2 also includes MSD1. So if you were to have two MSDs, the oceanfront would be in both, and they would pay both rates, and they would pay the town rate. So I'll stop there, and what I'm hopeful for is I can get some general feedback and whether or not really in MSD1, what properties you want to include, and consider what properties you want to include in MSD2. And then you may have some questions about the value and those sort of things that we may need to get back to you on for your February meeting. So I'll stop there.
Sheila, can we fix this screen so it's just effective? Oh, it's okay. It's just a little distracting. It keeps popping on and on. We can use one over here, though. Just have to change my mindset. I'm having some, I guess, questions about the fact we're trying to break MSD1. We're going to single out certain individual properties because they have to be a few feet further back, or they have to be clustered where they don't all have an individual access to the beach, or they have a common access. I'm having a little trouble differentiating that why, for example, in Pelican Watch, they would be less, they're benefiting less by being on the road behind the ocean than they are on the ocean front. I'm having a hard time figuring out why we have to differentiate that to that degree. Why wouldn't we treat them all as being properties that benefit from where they are and tax them like we did the previous nourishment project where they all paid a certain share?
I think that makes sense, and I think you can do that. At some point you could split this a lot of different ways, and at some point you just have to decide,
Right.
based on what you just said, in that all the properties that are east of the Ocean Boulevard receive the same benefit, so they're going to be taxed the same. Now, and I guess what I'm getting down in the weeds if when I start to illustrate that, you could pick the properties that are just have, because there's a couple of flag lots in this that have very little oceanfront compared to the others, and at some point you can get right down to a matter of feet, and it just becomes too much. And so I think what you said makes sense.
If you're oceanside and you're, for example, that situation there just north of Pelican Watch or the situation up at Mockingbird, they're ocean access properties that are really right there. They're not having to go, a quarter of a mile to get to the ocean.
And you're exactly right. These properties right here,
Right.
those two properties are side by side, but the property to the north has a little bit of, it's a flag property that has a little bit of oceanfront access. So it's tough to, I guess you can make the argument either way but they're side by side. So how are they not receiving the same benefit?
Mhm.
I'm of this mindset, and I probably may be alone in this, but I'm of the mindset that the more properties we can put in an MSD or whether MSD one or MSD two, the overall impact is that everybody pays a little bit less instead of everybody paying a little bit more, at least in my mind. And that's my thoughts, Council. At least for right now. I think the important thing here is we have to, regardless of what we decide to do with this, we have to give our manager some direction, what we want him to do. And our finance officer as well.
And when we advertise this public hearing, we're going to advertise something that may or may not look exactly like you adopt. For example, you could advertise the public hearing that turns all those properties red to blue on the east side of the Ocean Boulevard. Doesn't mean you have to. It doesn't mean you may not hear some public input that you hadn't considered, and that you kind of change course or change direction. Obviously, that's the whole point of the public hearing, so the public can weigh in on that. So at some point, I think you've just got to put something out there that you decide is the right thing to do, and let the public comment on it.
I got a question for the mayor. I agree a lot with what you're saying. When Cliff highlighted those two little flag lots there, I think, what are they called? Mistletoe or Mockingbird Lane, for example. Those were not oceanfronts, so they're colored red.
Right.
But the one
Would
next-
that argument that you're making, could that mean also that we just take all of those properties that are in red right now and just make one MSD?
We want to do a single MSD. Wait a minute, go back to that slide. What I see in red for the most part is to the east of
NC 12.
on the south end, east of Highway 12.
But what about on the northern end? I mean,
Then you get into the part that's a little more difficult. You're making MSD two, which is a red, if I'm not mistaken. That'd be MSD encompassing all of Seacrest Village.
what if we made all of that just one MSD? That would help spread that cost out further so that the oceanfront wasn't bearing the brunt of it. But then I don't know, it's a chicken and an egg kind of just, discussion that I'm bringing up.
Have you looked at the financial? I think that's like a dime on that whole MSD. If you combine two and one, and it was one MSD, it would probably be about a dime.
And that's one of the main reasons I'm even bringing that up, is because it helps mitigate the cost to
It might be a little bit more than that.
If you were to have one MSD,
Just if 1 and 2 were one,
I see what you're saying.
MSD one and two, make them one.
Yeah, the value in that would be 589,000. MSD two is both.
MSD 2 is both. I got it.
Right, so it'd be $589 million, which would reduce the tax.
Which is 16 cents.
Right.
There's an old design saying that keeps coming back to me: less is more. Also put as keep it simple.
In other words, you would propose a single MSD.
I'm not proposing that, but I'm wondering if it's worth us looking at just having one MSD. That way it spreads the cost out amongst more properties. But then also, I don't know, it's just a lot simpler.
Yeah, it's simpler, but you're gonna make everything on the west side of Highway 12, let's say, plus a few selected properties along the east side of Highway 12 and Seacrest Village, all be in the same MSD with the oceanfront.
That's what he's suggesting, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm not totally opposed to that, but how do you?
It's about $800. I mean, I'm doing really back of the napkin the math. It's about $800 per $500,000 of value if you were to do that.
Just combine all those properties. In other
So
words,
if you had
they're all-
a
they're
$1
all
million
arriving- they're all-
property, it'd be $1,600. If you had a $500,000 property, it'd be another $800. So those people over by Route 12, there are 2 lots in from Route 12, would have a tax increase of about $800 if you did that.
You're,
That's the part I'm not particularly, I don't know that that's the direction I would like to go.
so if you have a $500,000 property, it's $800.
Yeah.
But on oceanfront, you have
And,
a
and
million.
again,
million and a
please
quarter, or
forgive me
$1.5 million.
because this is very fast math. I have not fact checked. I think it's computing.
Yeah, I was asking Cliff if there was any way we could be able to, instead of relying on, doing it in your head or whatever, is there any way we could get the tax values, of all the properties that we're looking at? So that if you change the line,
Mhm.
you could immediately,
See
look
the-
at the numbers,
impact.
what it would mean for individual taxpayers.
Yeah.
But he said we're not there yet, I think.
We're not there yet because it's still, like, the Carters provided us a similar spreadsheet and I kind of built an ad hoc one, but just as we're discussing, I had to modify it based upon the MSD construct. But it's still, the basic numbers are still the same. The town's got $1.5 billion value. The MSD is about 600 million. You can kind of roll from there. So when Jim suggested combining, it was very easy to combine the
Yeah.
600 million and apply it across the
That's right.
tax rate. But
If what I heard you saying was what I had is 2 MSDs was you combine everything into one. If you look at this spreadsheet, there'd be $589 million in that one MSD. If they generate 75%, they're paying 15.59 cents plus the townwide. So,
So it'd be about 17.
right. And versus if you were to just have one MSD, just, on the oceanfront, they'd be paying about 30 cents.
And just for discussion purposes, I did a little homework on what the other towns have done. And again, don't hold me to these numbers, but it looks like in Kill Devil Hills, they ended up with about 33 cents for those oceanfront properties.
Yeah, this on the screen now, these are the tax rates for countywide, and you'll see, if you start up at the top, it says Kill Devil Hills Town, and then Kill Devil Hills Beach Nourishment. Their MSD is paying 24 cents. It's one thing to keep in mind, is a little hard to determine out of this list is how much of the Kill Devil Hills general fund goes to beach nourishment, because it's probably buried in that general fund rate. Unlike Kitty Hawk, who tax their entire town, they show that. And for example, Kitty Hawk says their townwide beach nourishment's 3.5 cents and their MSD is 10 cents.
And then furthermore, off their website, I gleaned townwide of 3 cents, but
Yeah.
again, I might be for Kill Devil Hills.
But, I see.
And then on Nag's Head, townwide was about 3 cents,
That's
about 0.027, and the 2 MSDs were about 17 and a half,
That's right.
Which is-
17 and a half each.
kind of what we're talking about. And then in Duck, which was almost dollar-wise, they said their project was about $14 million. This is all from the website. And which is very similar to our price tag. And they did 2 MSDs. The rates were, for the oceanfront properties were 31.5 cents. And they literally took it because the peninsula is so narrow up there. They took all the properties from sound to ocean and put them in another MSD just for the extent of their project. And that was almost 15 cents. 0.148 is what I looked up. Again, from their website.
Right.
I could be wrong. Don't hold me to any.
Well, if you're wrong, the website's wrong.
Don't don't hold me to any numbers. I may have written it down wrong, but that's
No,
what
you didn't do it.
that's what,
So the closest option we have that kind of correlates with that duck model would be option one, I think, unless somebody else thinks differently. The
option.
tax rates would be similar and the property allocations are similar.
You taking the MSD out to Duck Road.
Route 12, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which one are you looking at, Matt?
Option one.
The only thing no one else in council has said that at least I don't think I've heard anyone say yet, is I sort of think that the town-wide number is a little low. And I would, instead of 25% of the burden, I think we should maybe think about something like 30%. Again, that doesn't help the folks in MSD 1 and 2 because they're going to pay that as well.
Yeah.
But it does have more skin in the game for the residents that is the most of the folks that live in town. And they are benefiting, as I see it, from our town revenues are greatly enhanced by the occupancy taxes as well as sales taxes.
Mhm.
And that's driven by the beach. It just is. That's what drives it.
So if you increase the town-wide to 30%, what happens to the 40 and 35? How do you apportion those then? Or are you just gonna combine them?
You either take 2.5 off each one or
Mhm.
that's up to you.
So if you were to change, if I were to, say 35, 30 and 35, the townwide would go up to about 2.75 cents.
Yeah, I don't know that I want to go that far, but
You said 30.
I said 30, yeah. And what Matt's suggesting is you take the other two up by 2.5 each, so that would be, what was it, 42 and a half and 37 and a
Take
half?
them down.
You lower the.
Take them down,
He was
Yeah, so it'd be
taking-
37.5 in one and 32.5 in two.
See, this is the problem with, using your math in the head. You can get in trouble.
Or anywhere, on a piece of paper.
So we're at 2.35 then.
And on a $500,000 home in town, that's an increase.
117.
$117
Yeah.
more in taxes, just for the beach
The
nourishment project.
town-wide portion.
Townwide portion,
Yeah.
yeah. And it was at like $98, just under 100. So I'm not
That's right.
asking, I'm not
It-
taking it.
It
Do
was
I,
a
under-
98, yeah.
Yeah.
do I understand then that townwide 30% do the MSD 1s and 2 share in that or how, or
They also would
Yes,
pay the
sir.
2.35 in addition to.
2.35? So they'd be at
The-
17,
MSD1 would pay all
18 something.
three.
Yeah, MSD 1 for beach nourishment would pay 24.7 cents,
And
Oh, yeah, I see it out
MSD2
there.
would pay
9.
9,
9.
and the rest would be the,
2.35.
Which going
Those
back,
are the individual tax rates we're haggling with. I think we need to focus on, I think we need to focus on geographic boundaries prior to that. I mean, if this is, we're talking about individual rates assigned to each MSD, but if we decide on the geographical boundaries, I think the tax rate becomes a fairly simple calculation.
Exactly, as I understand it, we need to agree on the boundaries, and then the tax rates would be addressed during our budget workshop, is that right?
yes,
Yeah. But there's a lot of merit to what Elizabeth is saying, I think. I've thought that also is spreading a little bit more of that amongst the rest of the town to help those on the ocean front and in the 2 MSDs. But again, discussions for our budget workshop.
yeah, the actual actions will be taken at 2 different points. I don't know if Ken's still on or not, but if you were to establish the MSD boundaries by May, You, of course, have until the end of June to set the rates. And, we're not going to have, going back to Ken's slide, we won't know. I mean, the earliest we would have a bid in, be ready to make a contract would be after you set the budget.
Yeah.
So the longer you wait on that, I guess, the better.
So let's work backwards. If we want to get into the real discussion, we got a little bit of time, maybe. Option 3 puts most of the burden, or at least their hypothetical burden, on the oceanfront, 75% of the debt service. Is this up for, does anybody support this?
No, I don't.
Well, it has some merit because it's of its simplicity, to build on what Councilman Connor said. I don't know that I'm going to advocate for it.
Yeah.
Because it's an awfully big project. When you look at the size of the other towns' projects, it's a pretty big project. And when I started thinking about, if you limit yourself to those properties, it makes it a little painful.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
It's also complicated because some of that is not actually, the SSCA is really the abutting property. So we're really going to the parcel behind the abutting property, which complicates the issue. I also just think that there are properties that will see an enhanced benefit from the nourishment that are beyond this boundary. And
Well, and then
I'd
you,
like to get,
yeah, and you go back to the way the tax office values the properties, and you see it's definitely a gradation as you go west from the ocean. So I think there's merit in that
yeah.
as well.
Man,
So-
you're speaking the truth, though. There are a lot of houses outside these MSDs that rent.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's houses townwide that rent, but I mean, I think there's foot traffic capable to get to the beach from a lot of these neighborhoods that will dramatically increase their desirability in their
Well,
property.
yeah,
value.
that's what,
So 2 reaches across a little bit more. Option 2 reaches across, adds second MSD. That's, how would you characterize this? Just the second lot back?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In some cases, that's west of 12. In some cases, it's just west of the T-heads in Seacrest Village or Ocean Boulevard.
That's right.
What this does is it alleviates a little bit of burden on the ocean front, knocks about 4 cents off of them, and then hits these properties for about 12 cents, or a total, both pretty high. I mean, the 12 cents, 870 for those properties, still puts a bulk of the burden on the ocean front. What does council think of this?
I personally don't think that there's that much of a difference between the benefits on that MSD2 versus all the rest of those east of NC12. I mean.
You mean the rest of Seacrest Village?
You mean,
and
Correct,
Ocean Boulevard?
correct. The rest of
That-
Seacrest
I
Village.
think that's the challenge I have. That person that's 3 lots into Seacrest Village has no additional cost burden. And I don't think there's a tangible real estate property value difference or storm protection difference from that lot. That would be 3 lots in or 4 lots in. I mean, the tax valuations are similar. Well, I think even the ocean influence shows it. They start to grade out about 5 or 6 in. So I mean, the county tends to agree with that. So I don't think I would be unpleasant with option 2 if it was a consensus, or I don't think I would be opposed to it if that was a consensus, but I think option 1, my thought is option 1 is captures
Is what?
the real, that it captures the real benefit of the properties that are going to be seeing benefit from,
Option 1,
Nourishment.
yeah, I got you. Option 1 is as adjusted to a 2.5% lower on those first two, MST1, MST2?
He's just talking about the boundaries right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we can still work on the tax
Yeah.
rates.
I could agree, work with option one. I kind of spread that around a little bit.
Yeah, but we're still trying to
But
determine if we want to.
there are, aren't there, on the ocean front, there are people that don't rent.
Mhm.
So, they're going to absorb the cost directly. They don't have the option of,
And there's a
That's
fair
okay.
amount of heritage properties, and I'll probably comment on this greater, on the ocean front, whether they've been inherited or they've been in family for generations, and they're going to feel the brunt of this, I think, on this additional tax rate, and they're not the only ones going to benefit the value. I mean, the town benefits from this. I do,
Overall.
my kids do, my wife does, Jim does, even over on Duckwood. So, I mean, the town benefits, but the properties, the people that will see an immediate real estate property increase in storm protection from these are, I think, best captured by option one. I think anybody can argue at the fringes. I mean, there's a lot of, whatabouts that can be said. But in terms of policy and proceeding forward, option one, I think, is the best capture of what we're trying to do in meeting the limits of the statute.
Of everything that's been presented and that we've talked about, I think option one is the best one also. Now, again, the actual tax rates that are assigned to all these different municipal districts will come about in our budget discussions. But like Matt's brought up, we need to be focusing on the boundaries now more than anything. And Cliff has told me that also.
Well, and you're always going to have the exception, wherever you draw the line.
Oh, yeah.
Because you look at every town that has done this so far, there's a line drawn somewhere where one neighbor is taxed at one rate and right next door, 20, 30 feet away, they're taxed at a different rate. So there's no getting around it. Once you create these things, they have boundaries, they have significance, and you can only try to do it.
do the best we can.
The best you can, trying to look at it holistically, is
And be
our
fair.
best.
And to your point, this one uses geographical and natural boundaries as our boundaries. And to me, I mean, a large thing is how fast well, I don't want to elaborate too much, but I mean, I think it's not one lot line we picked 820 feet from the ocean front is now within this MSD and everything
Everybody can
outside
see
of that.
that.
I mean, it uses our roads, it uses the way that these streets and houses are lived on and multi-purposed. And it also captures a large portion of town that we hear most of the support for beach nourishment from.
Yeah.
And I think that they've recognized in our prior discussions that they will be included in this and with very little opposition.
Yeah. And most people understand those natural boundaries with the road, where the road is and what side you're on. So it's a little easier to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking to your comment earlier, though, Leo, there are a number of year-round residents east of NC 12
Yeah.
there. But I think, Cliff, correct me if I'm wrong, about 80 of them are year-round residents out of about 500 properties. So I think going back, speaking to Elizabeth's point, everybody's going to be affected in some
Oh, I
way.
understand that. I just want to, I've had some conversation, not from people there, but further in, you're going to be penalizing them, they don't have the opportunity to defer that or pass that cost on to somebody else.
No, but they may sell their property to somebody who
Oh, I
will have
understand
that
that.
option. So it's hard to split hairs like that.
I'm just sharing what has been shared with me.
Yes,
Needs
it's
to be
concerning to
thought
me
about.
also.
Because when you see, that's a pretty good chunk of percentage there, either way, no matter how we cut it. But I do like option one.
My vote is hands down for option one out of the options that are in this book.
And we're going to clean this up a little bit, is that correct? Take out some of those outliers?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah,
if
it's
that's
either
if that's okay with everybody else, I think we take out some of those individual lots that are now in option.
In other words, the red ones that are surrounded by blue are going to now be blue?
Like the blue,
So all those would be in MSD
talking
one,
about a minimal number of properties.
Yeah, it's just a handful.
those, and those. And what about these? Do you go all the way to Hickory? I guess I'm asking about these here.
I would say yes, just because it's everything east of NC 12 or Ocean Boulevard.
Wow.
Well, yeah, okay.
North of Hickory
Let me
would be
back
east
off
of
that
NC
one.
12. South of Hickory.
I don't know if this map helps.
That's the only place where it's a tough call to me.
It is, because I mean, that's a pretty large burden on some of those properties, and they won't see the immediate value increase that the actual oceanfront property will. Even some of the ABs further down Ocean Boulevard, I feel are a little similar.
Those.
What would be a mechanism for that? Would public hearing comment from those individuals? I mean, it's, this is the what ifs and what about.
Yep, that's the hard one right
Scenarios.
there.
Yeah, everyone in an MSD will receive a notification that what's being proposed, and they'll have the ability to come to the public hearing, or they have until 5 days after the public hearing to submit to you public comment. And really, the statute's designed for those property owners to be able to tell you why you shouldn't include them in an MSD.
Yeah, no later.
And then for them to convince you that if they're in this red circled area and you tax them at a higher rate, why you shouldn't do that.
So we don't need to decide right this second, but in option one on the map that's in our packet, those are in MSD two. And I would leave those properties in MSD two, and even some of the further ones down on Ocean Boulevard.
You're
And
saying,
specifically because MSD two is percentage wise, I think the tax rates applied to MSD two better represent the property value increase that those parcels will see based upon the nourishment project. Not just property value increase, but storm protection as well. I mean, clearly the oceanfront gets the number one level of storm protection and property value increase.
I'll say this property here, does that leave them red, or does that leave them in MSD two or one?
I would posit now for discussion that we leave it in two.
Okay, I wanted to point back out then that, remember,
What about those?
yeah,
in this instance, at least in 2017,
Pelican Watch is more of a PUD, I mean, it's a planned unit development. I mean, you could treat that whole parcel, even though it's individual ownership, it's as one development. And I think that you could convince me otherwise, especially since they've already sort of accommodated for it as a group. But further down the line, I don't think that some of the benefits of this nourishment will reach those other parcels that appear to be outliers, but I don't think the benefits will reach them to the same extent it reaches all of MSD1.
so what you're saying, I think, is keep the ones on the south end as blue.
Yes.
Pelican Watch is all blue, and then as we move further north, we change our strategy a little bit and say those four circles there should stay as.
Yeah, they appear as outliers, but I think there's still credible reasoning for why they're in MSD2 and not one.
So I'm
But I'm
sorry.
willing, I mean, that's the debate. I mean, that's where we need to develop consensus, because that's just one man's opinion.
The one that's
Yeah,
on
I
the screen
don't
right now,
agree with
would you
that.
keep blue or red?
I think
I would keep them red.
Well, the nice thing is it's north of the split, so we're consistent there.
consistent to the split. And then you get those four, well, three are smaller, but the.
It's specifically the Purple Martin and Sandpiper properties that I can, in Mockingbird, that I really don't think should be included. The other ones I don't think should, but if the consensus was to include them in MSD one, I probably wouldn't hesitate as much. They're less desirable, they're smaller lots, they're non-conforming.
What does the tax department put on those?
That's a good question.
We don't have that at our
Ye-
fingertips,
yes.
do we? The
Ju-
four circles that we're looking at, Wes?
Up by Dolphin, Mullet Circle, that area.
What is
It
the,
would be that one, and that one. Well, yeah.
yeah.
The
Where
ocean
do they fall
influence.
in that ocean
Or they,
influence scheme?
They've given the special call out.
Yeah, so they're not the same.
So they,
yeah, they do.
It's not as clear cut an answer, but
But they treat them the same.
they treated them the same as the ocean front,
No, it's,
the next step down.
yeah, in Pelican's Watch, they're the same. They're ocean, yeah, the next step down, right, yes, ma'am.
Well, one positive thing about this discussion right now is we're really getting down to the nitty gritty now.
We're getting in the weeds.
But I guess the answer is their land value is valued less than the oceanfront.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that should be a criteria we could consider.
Well, I mean,
It-
It could be a deciding factor. Or maybe the factor we decide whether we leave it in or take it out.
and
But then
again,
the flip side too is the land value is theoretically assessed lower. Also, their storm protection benefits are, I mean, they're not the ocean, the
Well, and-
structures on those properties are, I mean, this is really splitting hairs, but they're less likely
okay.
to be
Y'all keep talking.
mitigated by, I mean, or impacted by a large storm event.
Well, and again, I would point out, they've, between ocean influence, you know, the tan ones and the dark blue ones is literally just a few feet.
Mhm.
Um,
But none of those properties have a pool teetering out on the edge or an east-facing deck or a slider that gets beat up by
Right.
ocean wash.
Right.
So to me, I just see them distinct from MSD one. That's the crux of my point.
Yeah.
And Cliff, in your requested action, you say that there's no action we need to take.
No.
And I'm not trying to wrap up our discussion, but it is, I mean, seems like we're driving towards consensus with some details that still need to be.
The option one.
So, yeah, and what I bring to you at your next meeting, you can change.
Mhm.
You know, if I bring to you that all these properties here are in MSD one, they're in MSD one. This one is MSD two, you can change all that.
And what about those three little circles above or below the word Atlantic? Are they?
Do I hear you saying make those MSD one?
I think,
Or at least for the sake of,
I would
Next
not,
meeting.
but I don't want to.
I think based on what I just saw, I'd be okay with leaving them as MSD two.
okay, so then
Yeah.
I'll
That's the
leave
way
all
the
that.
tax group.
What about, do I have this right? These properties particularly, let me get rid of, how am I doing as McMahon here with the teleprompter?
Cliff, do you know what that street on the south end is by Pelican Watch? That's a half circle street?
Um,
Yeah, what is it? Oh, I can't think of the name of it.
that one?
Yeah,
Yes.
where that red,
Pelican Way?
no.
Well, the only reason I ask what
Yeah.
the street name is
Seabass.
Matt, you referenced the planned unit development, which I read as Pelican Watch, but is that street also part of the planned unit development?
No.
Okay, so we're just excluding those two. We're making those two part of MSD1 then.
The west side of Pelican Watch and the next little three or four house cluster there.
Right.
What is the, I can't think of what those houses look like.
I can bring it up.
And what I'm getting at is using Matt's logic to keep all of,
There's only one house that's on the west side of that, or one structure.
Yeah.
I see.
well, if we kept everything MSD1 that's in that planned unit development, then using the logic that we are using going north of the flagpole, we should keep that one on that Half Moon Street
Yes.
Which is Seabass.
red also.
I follow what you're saying, yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm just throwing that out. I'm not
I think
proposing
you're-
that.
I
I
think you're
just,
on it. That's outside of the cohesive development, and it would follow the same rhythm as the Mullet Circle properties.
Yeah, Seabass.
Oh, shoot. One red and two blues or something like that?
yes. Yes, the ones within the Half Moon would be red. And the ones that are accessing the Half Moon Street would be blue.
So that would be red.
That way we're saying, we're using the same logic as we are further north in town. When we get north of the triangle.
Just this, I don't want to get too much into the individual tax rates, but what did Pelican Watch pay for the 17? What was their tax increase for the 17 project?
They pay 30% of our share of the total.
Yeah, so it was done, Bonnie, can you speak into the microphone? Sorry.
So that was done, the town's portion was 500,000, the county paid the other half. So of that amount, the town paid 350, and the property owners were taxed, the 150 over 5 years, and it was according to the value of the properties. So they all pay something a little different according to the value of each property. But they ended up paying 30% of the town's, not the total, but of the town's portion.
Did that equate to a cent tax rate though? As a
Yes,
special assessment?
it did, but
That's
do
fine.
not
We
know
can
what
look.
that is,
I'm
yeah.
gonna probably sleep on this part. I mean,
yeah.
because I want.
Here's
Thank you, Bonnie.
something, Bonnie, that I wanted to ask you. The assessment that was done on them, that will be settled
Okay,
by the
so,
time the next beach renourishment rolls around.
yeah, that's right. So we're in current year right now, we're in year 4.
Mhm.
So we will start year 5, July 1st of this year. So that'll be the final, so that'll overlap 1 year.
So they'll be hit with the last year of their previous assessment along with the new tax
That is
on the
correct.
they know that?
MSD.
That is correct.
Has there been any outreach to communicate that to them?
No, sir.
Do we think that would be wise? I mean, it is what it's mathematics. It's not intentional punitive action, but
Would you state your question again on this?
if the people in Pelican Watch that have already been paying a special assessment understand that there may be a 1-year overlap if there's an additional MSD assessment placed upon them.
If
So I
they-
mean, that, for that one single year on some of these
They'll have a
properties,
double
it
burden.
could be a $2,000 or $3,000 increase for them. Yeah. And again, it is what it is, but I would be upset if I figured that
I
out a
think
little.
a explainer would be in order.
Yeah.
Or a waiver?
A waiver.
It looks like they're roughly about $450 and special assessments for these properties.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Cliff, can you state that again?
It looks roughly as though they're paying about $450.
What would the average value of those you think about?
The,
And I'm guess, not accurate.
let's see, the one that I selected is $700,000.
Okay.
Is it feasible that during our budget negotiations, we can bring up that concept of waiving or dropping that last year assessment so that they're not hit with being assessed twice or taxed twice for it?
Yeah, but if you do that, then I guess it would have to come out of the general fund
Yeah.
as a whole.
Some of them have probably already paid that. We gave them the option, Bonnie, as I recall, of going ahead and paying it in full, or have it spread over 5 years.
To date, no one has paid ahead. They've paid each year.
Okay.
But I think I would have to go back and see if last year and this year, I think were the first 2 years that we actually budgeted special assessment as a revenue source. So I guess if they wanted to not budget that as a revenue source, that would be another way, right? So we've budgeted that the last 2 years as a revenue source. So if you decide to do like Jim's doing, then what we would do is we wouldn't show that as a revenue source for this upcoming year. I'm assuming we could do it that way.
That's around $12,000 or so, probably a little more.
The figure I gave you of that 450 was for one of the duplexes. It does go up. I mean, here's the property, theirs is $1,800. So it is not insignificant for some or all. 6 Ocean Boulevard, their special is $1,800.
Well, have we accomplished what we set out to do on this agenda item?
Have we made a decision?
I don't know. Well, do we need to make a decision, or have you received enough guidance, you think?
I think I have enough guidance to bring back to you something you can adopt, or at least be the framework of something you adopt.
Based primarily on option one, right?
Yes, sir. I do want to ask though, the properties in the west, and again, you don't have to decide this today, but this is what I'll be bringing back is the MSD2 would be everything that abuts NC12 on the west side. Okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
I think that captures what I was hoping.
Okay.
So you can move on to the next agenda item?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
For ZEV.
So we have item B. This is going to also be your area, Cliff. Grant
sir.
consideration to NCDEQ for a zero emission vehicle charging station, which is tab 2 in your book, Council.
I think so.
Hey, folks, this is Ken. I was just going to say I'm going to jump off if that's all right.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Sorry, we should probably let you
Oh, no
jump off.
problem, no
too.
problem. I'm being productive here on the side, but I was listening in for sure.
Thanks again.
All right, take care.
Okay, so the Volkswagen settlement from 3 or 4 years ago was settled at upwards of about $15 billion. And the states could sign on to get a portion of that. North Carolina's portion was $100 million. The Department of Environmental Quality has been tasked with administering how those funds are distributed. The states come up with a three-phase plan. We're still in phase 1, and there's 5 programs in that first phase. One of which includes about $1.2 million on a first-come, first-served basis to reimburse municipalities, government it could, private homeowners, not so much private homeowners but an apartment complex, housing complex, for charging stations. The grant reimburses up to a maximum of $5,000 per port. A port is a plug-in charging station. You're required to have at least 2 at each site. So we could apply for a charging station with two plugs, would get $10,000 in rebates back. Some of the requirements of this grant would be that for government-owned properties, the station, and what I have in your packet proposes, if you were to choose to do this, we'd put the charging station at the northwest corner of Town Hall. And those 2 spots would be available at a minimum of 12 hours a day for anyone to charge their electric vehicle. The quotes or the bids and the prices that I've been getting, it would pay for, the 10,000 would pay for the charging station. It would pay for a 5-year, and it's a minimum of 5 years you have to have these in place. 5-year warranty, there's a requirement that it be networked. As long as you pay for those in advance, the grant will cover that. The town can charge a fee to recoup some of the cost, to at least cover our cost. I think we pay about 9 cents a kilowatt hour, so we can charge in excess of that to get our cost back. It wouldn't have to be at that particular site. It could be at another one of our sites. It could be at the East Station, the East Fire Station. I mean, I think what makes our application, and again, it's first come, first served, but one of the goals of this obviously is to reduce emissions, but also to reach the most highly used areas, and us being in a tourist area would be beneficial. These charging, there are not, that I can tell, if you go to a plug-in or plug share, you'll see where all the charging stations are in the country. There's one in Kitty Hawk, and then there's 2 in Duck. There's one at Barrier Island and one at the Waterfront Shops, and those are the closest to us. So I get the grant application is due or opens January 25th, and it's apparently extremely competitive. They're advising that you get on at 12:01 that morning to apply for the grant. There may be an opportunity for us to apply later. There's no plan on paper that there's going to be another bid open or another request for proposals, but we could potentially in phase 2 or 3 see another opening for this type of expense. I apologize for bringing this with very little opportunity to decide, because this is your last meeting before the application. We would have to, it would require, if you decided to do this, a budget amendment. We'd have to expend the funds up front and then get reimbursed.
Yeah, it's a performance grant.
Right. And the expense, the most negotiable of this, where the price can be up or down, and I'm estimating that if you were decided to do this at a cost not to exceed $15,000, is the actual installation of running the electricity to the site. There are several things that the reason that they have to be networked is to keep up with the data. Apparently, there's apps that you can join and pay through the app for the charging station. You can get online and schedule a time that you would actually go to the charging station. And the way you can set your fee structure, it is networked. So if someone were to charge and be fully charged and sit there for a couple hours afterwards, you can charge them by the hour for taking up the space. So that you can adjust the structure of the fees. And I could go in, we could make Earth Day free, and anyone that charged, and you could just simply do that to be networked. I think that captures the grant.
We would have 2 stations then.
Yeah, it'd be one
One on each
unit,
side.
but there's 2
Oh,
ports.
okay, so it's really one station with 2 ports.
That's correct. So it would require 2 parking spaces.
space.
2 parking spaces.
Two.
Yeah, we'd put the unit in the middle of those 2 spots.
Right, okay.
the devil's getting into the details, or the details are what, my question is does that warranty cover our environment out here?
Great question, and yes, sir, it does. That is taken into consideration in these builds. There's actually, there's one in Avon that I think has been underwater, and it still functions.
And it's.
Okay,
Yeah, if you go, and I should have pulled this up, you can see where they are. There's some on the West Coast that seem pretty vulnerable, some in Hawaii that seem pretty vulnerable. Probably not as much as Avon, but yes, sir.
well, hopefully it's not like barbecue grills where they say it's warranted, but they still rust out within a couple years. But, okay, if the warranty covers it, cool.
Well, and you got a maintenance contract there for 5 years too.
So you need a motion to
Well,
allow,
the requested action is a motion to approve application for the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, NCDEQ, for a $10,000, I guess it's $10,000 grant for participation in phase 1 of the NC Volkswagen Mitigation Settlement Program, and authorize an amount not to exceed $5,000 for costs not covered by the grant amount.
That, I should have clarified. I would need a $15,000 budget amendment, and that 15,000 would come from unassigned fund balance. Then we get the grant. If we don't get the grant, we don't do it. If we get the grant, then we reimburse the fund balance. Yep.
Can you
So-
repeat what Bonnie just said? I'm
And
sorry.
we would show in that budget amendment, $10,000 coming from the grant
Right,
and
5 from
5,000.
the fund balance.
Thank you.
But the actual amount we're looking for is $15,000.
Correct.
Okay. That's a motion on the floor, council. Do I have any more discussion, or before that, do I have a second?
I would like to second that motion.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just a couple, but we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I don't think I want to see this at the end of our parking lot in town. The East Dogwood Fire Station, if that's possible, I think would be a better location for it. I don't know if council has a better thought. That's already kind of an awkward ingress over there to lose those parking spots. Somebody who comes to town for services a lot, I mean, I think it would be an impact there.
well, we're making a motion to pursue the grant. We can have further discussions on actually where.
Yeah, but whether or not I would
It's
vote to
installed.
pursue the grant depends on where it's going to get put.
Yeah.
So if you're going to stick it out there.
Let's get awarded the grant first.
And
then-
I also would like to have just a brief discussion what the purpose is. Are we selling power now as a town? Or are we seeking to maybe upgrade our fleet to electric vehicles in the future? I mean, what's the goal here? Is it just to take advantage of a grant, or do we have a master plan in mind?
My thought, Matt, was just to accommodate the public and the fact we have more and more electric cars. I didn't put any value on it beyond that.
I just was drawn to it because I believe it's good for the town to be seen as an entity that is promoting the use of non-emission vehicles. And the only way we can get people to move in that direction is to have more opportunities for them to charge those vehicles.
In some respects, I disagree with what you're saying. I don't really care as much about the visibility of the town, but I fall back on the position that people are doing this.
Mhm.
They are buying electric vehicles. So it's providing a service for them. I'm not as much concerned about our public relations aspect.
So-
I
This
wasn't
is
really
mostly-
talking public relations as I am just talking about the ability of the town to
Yeah.
participate in
To
something that's
be
good
able
for
to
the
provide-
community.
yeah.
And I think that's what's encouraging me too. For somebody who's looked into purchasing an electric vehicle, if you're a local, you're most likely going to have a charging station at your home, and you're not going to charge daily. So this is largely for our transit traffic, our tourist traffic. So, I mean, again, diverting them off 158 into our town parcel at a half hour, 45-minute interchange while there's charging, I'd rather see it off of Route 12 over on East Dogwood. And I would like to accompany it with potentially, as we look to fleet acquisition, that we shifted electric vehicles and use our services. Because the part that sticks with me a little funny, to recoup our services, we're going to be charging people for power. So now we're operating a fueling station essentially. And Yeah, I don't know. If it could be dual purposed with a town intent, whether our fleet starts transitioning and that's our fueling, we save on fuel costs or something of that nature, I would feel
So
more
are we
comfortable
we
with
better off to put this in the marketplace if they would allow us to have them?
That would reduce our grant to what, 8,000? So it'd be a little bit more upfront cost, but I mean, gosh, that'd be a much better location, but I think if we could find a hybrid solution, maybe somewhere that wasn't right here in our parking lot, that would be, I mean, it's probably not a huge deal, but you are going to introduce traffic to it and people driving specifically to plug in at our town hall. Maybe that's good, but then to couple it with the fact that we're charging them for it, I don't know.
Do we know where there are the other 2 or 3, what their usage is?
I don't, I mean, that information's I think online. I mean, I think you can go and see, just like you'd be able to ours, anyone could go and see the usage. how
Well,
many
I was just
people have been
thinking, in Buxton, is
there.
is that a high volume area down there or how?
NAGSTED's considering placing it on their municipal property, correct?
Yes, sir.
I don't know if they've taken action.
I think there's some merit to your argument about putting it on 12, just because it's
Well, it'd be
easier
convenient.
ingress and egress.
For the end user, I think it would be,
I don't really have
there's a stoplight there. And
Yeah.
I think the question would be, are we taking too much from the fire station, which they've kind of abandoned use, but Public Works is now using it and the life savings services are using it.
Yeah, and
Where would you put it on 12?
over there at the east.
East
fire
Dogwood
station
Fire
is what
Station.
Matt's proposing.
That-
A little hard to get in and out of.
You got light access. And so,
You do,
You got
you
stuff
do, as
like
long as you're
that.
patient.
I mean, that's where most gas stations on the beach are, light access.
Yeah.
We can vote. I just wanted to throw those points out there. I mean, because I would,
Well-
if we receive the grant, I would like to see some effort to be made to as we purchase new fleet vehicles, to at least consider the cost of electric vehicles in their place. If they're stupid expensive, that's a whole different animal.
Well, they're not cheap, but if you saw the Wall Street Journal this morning, there's a whole nother concept, how they're going to start redesigning some of the road infrastructure where there's devices under there. As you drive over it with your vehicle, it charges it.
Yeah.
And that's the first
That'd
I'd
be
seen
amazing,
that, but
too.
that's,
Well, battery costs are coming down.
oh, yeah.
The range is increasing dramatically. I don't think anybody in our town staff drives past the range of any of these vehicles. And they have longer life cycle. So
Yeah. There's been a lot of, enhancements in the design.
We could, in our purchasing policy, we could include a requirement to bid or to get a quote
Yeah.
at least
Sounds like a
for
good
all
idea.
vehicles.
Well, that or a combination, of a hybrid type.
Well, I gave up my 7 minutes. let's vote.
You can't talk anymore.
Well, anyhow, we got a motion in a second on the
I
floor.
yield
What
to
are we
Councilman
doing?
Leo.
The mayor made the motion
Yeah,
and I seconded.
it. So,
I think we're ready to vote.
We're ready to vote, folks. Anybody, all in favor of approving having Cliff go ahead and move forward with it for the application for the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality for a $15,000 grant participation in phase 1 of the NC Volkswagen Mitigation Settlement Program, indicate so by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion's made and carried. To move forward, Cliff. Down toward right down near the finish here. Council comments. Let's start with our Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't have anything today, Mayor Bennett. Thank you.
Jim?
I just want to point out that Matt and I will be part of a street improvements committee meeting this week. Is that tomorrow?
Thursday.
Thursday at 2 o'clock. So we'll be going over things at that point.
Matt?
The only comment I have is as we finish tax rate discussion, there are quite a few heritage properties and legacy properties on the ocean front. And if they haven't already applied for historic tax designation, that is a way for some of these properties to mitigate their tax increase by becoming a historic landmark property. So if that avenue is open to any of those individuals that are hesitant of some of the taxes that are coming from being an MSD1, that I would encourage them to contact the Landmark Commission and make application. And try
Mr.
to
Mackey is already in that program, as a matter of fact.
Well, I understand Mr. Mackey is, but there's others out there that are
Right,
going to see an increase. And if they put themselves in the program, they have a 50% reduction. So, of
Thank you,
their
Matt.
total tax bill,
Thank you, Matt.
Southern Shores tax bill.
Leo?
The only comment I got to make is I did get my first COVID vaccination, and I want to compliment Sheila Davis and the Dare County Health and Human Service Group, because it was well organized, well ran, very accommodating to people. If you couldn't get into the bomb center, they had people there that with wheelchairs to help get you in so you get your vaccine. Very well organized, so I want to compliment them on that.
Thank you, Leo. Appreciate it. I have nothing to add, council. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any discussion?
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. We are adjourned. Good meeting, guys.